All right, so welcome now to 1.2, which kind of picks up right where we left off with regard to 1.1. And in 1.2, as you can see here, right, we're going to learn how to distinguish between arguments and non-arguments. And this, of course, is an important skill because all of the skills we'll be developing in this course will pertain to arguments, right, evaluating them, determining if they're, in a certain sense, good or bad. And so we need to tell the difference between an argument and a non-argument. All right, so there are three ways to distinguish between arguments and non-arguments. First of all, you can simply look for an inferential relationship between some of the statements and one of the statements in a passage. Now, I know that sounds kind of complicated or complex, but what that simply means is sometimes you can read a passage and it will just be completely obvious that this is an argument that this person is trying to prove a particular claim. You can remember from 1.1 the argument I gave you about George W. Bush, right? There were no indicator words there, but clearly they were trying to prove that first claim in that passage. Secondly, you can look for the presence of premise or conclusion indicators. And, note that the presence of premise and conclusion indicators doesn't guarantee that what you're looking at is in fact an argument, right? So in other words, this is important. When you read a passage and you see the word therefore, or thus, or because, right? These are all conclusion and premise indicators. I would say that that raises the likelihood that what you're looking at is an argument, but it does not guarantee that it is. And that is because, as we'll see at the end of 1.2, explanations, which are not arguments, often use that same kind of terminology, those same kinds of indicator words, but again, they're not arguments. So we'll look for those at the end of 1.2 here. All right. So finally, what you can do to distinguish between arguments and non-arguments is you can try to identify a particular passage as one which is clearly recognized as non-argumentative. And that's what 1.2 really looks at, all the different variety of passages that just aren't arguments. So, for example, right, again, continuing with the early theme of the class, we've got a picture of a marmot there. And so somebody might say, look out, he's got a marmot. Now, just to be clear, marmots are not particularly dangerous. In fact, they're quite cute and funny little creatures. I took this picture myself up at Mount Rainier National Park. I encourage you to go there yourself and have, a marmot experience, we'll just say. Nonetheless, back to this passage. This is not an argument, right? There's no conclusion here. There's no evidence given for a particular claim, so it simply can't be an argument. Now, could these kinds of sentences here be involved in arguments? Sure. Somebody might say, oh, that person over there is carrying a marmot. Marmots like to bite people, and so you should stay away from that person, right? Now we've got two bits of evidence given for a particular claim, and that, in fact, in those cases, that definitely would be an argument. But just as it is here, right, it's just a short warning, not an argument. Pieces of advice. These are not arguments, right? Somebody comes up to you, or you know somebody, and they say, you should get a haircut. Okay, well, I understand. That might start an argument, right? But it's by itself definitely not an argument. There's no evidence given for a particular claim. Again, for some statement like this to be involved in an argument, it would have to be sort of included with things like, oh, I heard you're going for an interview at Microsoft. I hear that they only hire people with closely cut hair, therefore you should get a haircut. Well, all of that, right, of course, would be an argument, but just this piece by itself, not an argument. All right, so statements of belief are not arguments, right? Somebody simply says, Rick Larson will be reelected in the next election. That's simply somebody stating what they believe is or will be the case. Nothing else is given there, right? So just this statement by itself would not be an argument. An argument has to include premises, right, and then a conclusion. Likewise, a statement of opinion would not be an argument, right? Today is a beautiful day. It's just a short statement, somebody's opinion, offering somebody's opinion, but there's no evidence given for it. Now, you might be at this point wondering, okay, it's not an argument, sure, I got that, but what distinguishes between statements of belief and statements of opinion. Well, statements of belief are about what are called matters of fact, okay? Whereas statements of opinion are about matters of opinion, as you might expect. The difference between matters of fact and matters of opinion is, in fact, a very important one. Matters of fact are issues that people really ought not disagree about, right, if they're in touch with the truth. Whereas matters of opinion are matters that people can disagree about, and we don't have to try and convince the other person that they're wrong, for example, right? So if somebody says that chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream, and I think it's vanilla, right? We don't need to have a debate about that. That's just a matter of opinion. So the label, statements of opinion, would be reserved for expressions of matters of opinion, like today is a beautiful day, whereas a statement of belief would be reserved for matters of fact, okay? Having said that, I also want to say here that all of these different types of non-arguments, you don't need to sweat the details there too much in this sense. Sometimes these types of non-arguments can kind of bleed into one another, so sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between a statement of belief and a statement of opinion, perhaps. Like the Mona Lisa is a beautiful work of art, right? Art historians might say, well, there is something to that. Somebody couldn't simply deny that the Mona Lisa had any beauty at all. So it kind of falls in a gray area between a matter of fact and a matter of opinion, for example. I'm not worried about that. Having said that, the more confident you are that a particular passage fits into one of these types of non-arguments, the more confident you will be that what you are, in fact, looking at is a non-argument. And that's the critical distinction. In fact, when it comes to the exam on the first section, I'll, again, give you a list of passages, and I'll ask you if it's an argument or not. If it's not an argument, you simply need to say, not an argument. You don't need to do anything more than that. Okay. If it is an argument, you know what to do with identifying premises and conclusions. Okay, so up to this point, right, let me back that up for just a moment. Up to this point, you might be thinking, okay, not non-arguments, those, right, there's a characteristic that helps you to identify them. They are short, right? All of the examples we've seen thus far were quite brief. But we have longer passages that are also not arguments, such as loosely associated statements, right? Here is a passage where we have multiple statements. In this case, they're all about Everett Community College. But as you can see, they're not really going anywhere. None of these statements here is a conclusion. The other statements here are not trying to prove that it's true. They just all happen to be about Everett Community College. And so since there's no conclusion here, it cannot be an argument. All right, reports. A report, even if it's a report of an argument, cannot by itself be an argument, right? So this passage, we might find a passage like this in the Clipper, right, the college newspaper. The president of the college argued, right, here's that word argue, that in order to meet the needs of students in Snohomish County, the size of the philosophy department would have to be doubled, right? By the way, not true, just a fantasy of mine, given that I'm the only full-time philosophy instructor, I get lonely. At any rate, yes, the word argue appears in this passage, but notice the real function of the passage is simply to tell us what happened, right? What happened was the president offered an argument. So it by itself is not an argument. Now, a passage like this, if it did appear in the paper, you can bet that I would use it in an argument. I would cite this passage and I would say, therefore, we ought to hire another philosophy instructor, right? But by itself, it's just telling us what happened, and so then it would not be an argument. A couple other important types of non-arguments here. Expository passages. So the community college is an educational institution. It educates a wide variety of people and teaches a wide range of topics. Again, this passage, and what makes it not an argument, essentially, is the fact that it's not trying to prove anything. Okay? You have a topic sentence here at the beginning, and then that topic sentence is expanded upon here below it. But it's not an argument. Now, this is a point at which I need to let you know that what makes something an argument is, to some extent, context dependent. So in other words, if somebody said, you know what, community colleges are not educational institutions, If I then offered in response to them this passage and said, no, in fact, you're wrong. The community college is an educational institution. It educates a wide variety of people and teaches a wide range of topics. Well, of course, at that point, I am arguing with them, right? I'm trying to prove they're wrong. But the idea that somebody would suggest that community colleges are not educational institutions is outlandish, right? And it's certainly not something I would presume anybody in this class would believe. And so given that context, that we all know that community colleges are educational institutions, this certainly is not trying to prove anything, and it's therefore not an argument. Similarly, right, we have illustrations. So every community college offers a wide range of courses. There are classes in philosophy and art, as well as welding and aviation technology. Again, here the idea is you have a topic sentence. We offer a wide range of courses, and then that topic sentence is illustrated below, right? Examples are provided of the wide range of classes that we do offer. It's not trying to prove anything, right? It's, in a sense, taking for granted that everybody knows we offer a wide range of classes. Now, there is, again, a bizarre context in which we could imagine somebody saying, you know what, every community college only offers one type of class. Now, that's bizarre. Nobody really believes that. But if somebody did and I were to offer this passage in response to them, right, to try and prove they were wrong or to convince them otherwise, sure, in that context it's an argument, but in the context of this class, where everybody knows that Everett offers a wide range of classes, in the context of this class, it's not an argument. It's not trying to prove anything. It's just trying to illustrate the topic set.